Everything changed at the Lakehouse. When Paul and Lillian vanished on the 4th, I caught them together at the Lakehouse, fireworks booming outside while my trust exploded inside. What would you have done? Lake George, New York, July 4th, 2025. The air smelled of citronella candles and barbecue smoke, a deceptively pleasant aroma for what was about to unfold. The sun was setting behind the Adirondack Mountains, painting the lake in shades of orange and purple. Everyone was gathering on the deck, ready for the fireworks display. My husband, Paul, 38, stood beside me, his hand resting casually on my back. My Aunt Lillian, 52, was fussing over the potato salad, her voice a little too loud, a little too cheerful. It was a perfect picture of domestic bliss, wasn't it? Except it was a lie, a carefully constructed facade. The first firework burst, a shower of gold cascading down the night sky. Oohs and ahs rippled through the crowd. I turned to Paul, wanting to share the moment, but he was already looking away, towards Lillian. A quick glance, barely perceptible, but I saw it. And that's when the unease, that little nagging feeling I'd been trying to ignore for weeks, solidified into something cold and hard in my stomach. They excused themselves, Paul to grab another beer, Lillian to check on the pie. Together, at the same time. I told myself I was being ridiculous, paranoid. It was the stress of work, the pressure of planning this entire getaway. But the feeling wouldn't go away. I excused myself too, muttering something about needing to use the restroom. Only I didn't go to the restroom. I went around the side of the house, towards the path that led down to the lake. I saw them there, silhouetted against the flickering light of the fireworks. Paul was talking, his voice low and urgent. Lillian was nodding, her hand resting on his arm. And then they walked away, towards the boathouse. The boathouse. Why the boathouse? It was old, barely used, filled with dusty life jackets and cobwebs. What could they possibly be doing there? My heart hammered against my ribs. I had to know. I crept closer, my footsteps muffled by the soft earth. The boathouse door was slightly ajar. Peeking through the crack, I saw them. Paul was holding Lillian's hands. He was saying something I couldn't quite make out, but his face was full of affection. It wasn't the friendly affection you have with a family member. It was something more, something intimate, something wrong. The fireworks boomed louder, mirroring the chaos erupting inside me. I wanted to scream, to confront them, to tear them apart. But I couldn't move. I was frozen, paralyzed by disbelief. Then they kissed. A brief chase kiss, but a kiss nonetheless. And in that moment, my world shattered. What do you do when the two people you trust most betray you in the most unimaginable way? How do you even begin to process something like that? I stumbled back towards the house, the fireworks now sounding like mocking laughter. I plastered a fake smile on my face and rejoined the party, pretending everything was normal, but inside, I was crumbling. Later that night, after everyone had gone to bed, I couldn't sleep. The image of that kiss was burned into my brain. I tossed and turned, my mind racing, trying to make sense of it all. I got up and walked to the kitchen, hoping a glass of milk would calm me down. As I reached for a glass, I noticed a piece of paper on the counter. It was a note from Lillian, addressed to Paul. "Meet me at the gazebo at midnight," it read. "We need to talk." The gazebo? The old, overgrown gazebo down by the lake? What could they possibly need to talk about at midnight? I grabbed the note, my hands shaking. This was it. This was my chance to find out the truth. I waited, counting down the minutes, my anxiety building with each tick of the clock. I slipped out of the house, careful not to wake anyone. The moon was full, casting long, eerie shadows across the lawn. The air was still warm and humid. As I approached the gazebo, I could hear their voices, hushed but intense. I hid behind a large oak tree, straining to hear what they were saying. "Are you sure this is going to work?" Lillian asked. Her voice was sharp, anxious. Of course it will, Paul replied. Just stick to the plan. We'll be rich. Rich? What plan? What were they talking about? I leaned closer, my heart pounding in my chest. But what about her? Lillian continued. What if she finds out? She won't, Paul said dismissively. She trusts us. Besides, what's she going to do? She's just an elementary school principal. Elementary school principal, that's me. And he said it like it was an insult. Like it made me stupid, naive. Like he could pull the wool over my eyes without any consequences. I felt a surge of anger, hot and blinding. I wanted to burst out of my hiding place and scream at them, to demand answers. But I held back. I needed to know the whole story. But I feel guilty, Lillian said. She's my niece. Guilt doesn't pay the bills, Lillian, Paul snapped. Think of the money. Think of what we can do with it. The money, that was their motivation. Greed? They were willing to betray me, to destroy our family. For money. I couldn't believe it. I felt sick. They continued to talk, revealing their plan in chilling detail. They were planning to sell the Lakehouse, the family Lakehouse, the one that had been in our family for generations. And they were going to split the profit, without telling anyone. But how are we going to do it? Lillian asked. She'll never agree to sell. She doesn't have to, Paul said, a sinister edge to his voice. We have the deed. The deed? I knew the deed was in a safe deposit box at the bank. My grandmother had been very specific about that. How could they have the deed? But it's in the safe deposit box, Lillian said, echoing my thoughts. Not anymore, Paul said, laughing softly. I took care of that. It's amazing what a convincing forgery can do. A forgery. They forged the deed. They were committing fraud. This was beyond betrayal. This was criminal. I backed away from the gazebo, my head spinning. I needed to get out of there. I stumbled through the darkness, tears streaming down my face. I couldn't believe what I had just heard, my husband and my aunt conspiring to steal our family legacy. How could I have been so blind, so trusting? I made it back to the house, collapsing onto the bed. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, my mind reeling. What was I going to do? Could I confront them? Should I go to the police? As I lay there, I remembered something Lillian had said earlier that day, something that had seemed innocent at the time. She had been talking about the renovations they were planning to do on their house back in the city. We're thinking of adding a sunroom, she had said, but it's so expensive. A sunroom. That's what they wanted the money for. A sunroom. They were willing to destroy our family for a sunroom. It was pathetic and infuriating. I knew I couldn't let them get away with it. I couldn't let them steal our family history. I had to do something. But what? How could I fight them? They were so much more cunning than I had ever imagined. It was risky, but it was the only way I could think of to expose them. I decided to play along. I would pretend that I knew nothing. I would act as if everything was normal. And I would gather evidence. I would build a case against them. The day passed in a blur of forced smiles and polite conversation. I watched them, studying their every move, trying to decipher their lies. It was exhausting, but I knew I had to stay strong. I had to be smarter than them. That afternoon, I decided to go for a walk. I needed some time to think, to clear my head. I walked down to the lake, towards the boathouse. I wanted to see if there was anything there, anything that could help me. The boathouse was just as I remembered it, dusty and dilapidated. I pushed open the door and stepped inside. The air was thick with the smell of mildew and old wood. I started to search, carefully examining every corner of the room. I found nothing, just old life jackets, fishing rods, and rusty tools. I was about to give up when I noticed something tucked away in the back corner of the boathouse. It was a small wooden box. I opened it. Inside, I found a stack of papers. I started to read them. They were documents related to the sale of the Lakehouse. Contracts, appraisals, all bearing my supposed signature. Forgeries. But these were different than the deed. These were more recent. These were the papers they were actively using to try and sell the house. And then I saw it. A copy of the forged deed. And on the back, a name. The name of the notary who had supposedly witnessed my signature. I recognized the name. It was a local lawyer, someone who had done work for our family in the past. Someone I trusted. Could he be involved? Could he be helping them? I grabbed the documents, my hands trembling. I had to get out of there. I stuffed them into my bag and hurried back to the house. That evening, I confronted Paul. I told him that I knew about the sale of the Lakehouse. I told him that I knew about the forged deed. I told him that I knew about his affair with Lillian. He denied everything, of course. He swore that I was imagining things. He accused me of being crazy. But I didn't back down. I showed him the documents I had found in the boathouse. I told him that I was going to the police. That's when he snapped. His eyes turned cold and hard. He grabbed my arm, his grip tight. "You're not going to do anything," he said, his voice low and menacing. "If you do, you'll regret it." He let go of my arm and stormed out of the room. I stood there, shaken and scared. I knew that he was capable of anything. He was desperate. I had to be careful. I couldn't trust anyone, not even my own husband. I showed him the document. He looked shocked, horrified. He swore that he had never seen it before. He said that his signature had been forged. He offered to help me. He said that he would testify against Paul and Lillian. He said that he would do everything he could to bring them to justice. I was relieved. But as I left his office, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Something wasn't adding up. Why would a reputable lawyer risk his career to help Paul and Lillian? It didn't make sense. I decided to do some digging. I started to research the lawyer's background. I looked for any connection between him and Paul or Lillian. And then I found it. A hidden connection. A financial transaction. A large sum of money that had been transferred from Paul's account to the lawyer's account just weeks before the forged deed was created. The lawyer was involved. He was in on it. He had lied to me. I felt betrayed all over again. How could I trust anyone? Everyone was lying to me, manipulating me. I was all alone. I went back to the Lakehouse, feeling defeated and hopeless. I sat on the dock, staring out at the water, wondering what to do. As I sat there, I noticed something floating in the lake, the same kind of box I had found in the boathouse. I reached out and pulled it out of the water. It was wet and slimy. Inside, I found a letter. It was addressed to me. I opened the letter and started to read. It was from my grandmother. It was written years ago before she died. In the letter, she explained everything. She knew that Paul and Lillian were greedy and manipulative. She knew that they would try to steal the Lakehouse. She warned me about them, and then she revealed a secret. She had created a second deed to the Lakehouse, a deed that named me as the sole owner, a deed that was hidden away in a safe place. She told me where to find it. I couldn't believe it. My grandmother had protected me, even from beyond the grave. I followed her instructions and found the second deed. It was hidden in a secret compartment in the attic. I had proof. I had the evidence I needed to expose Paul and Lillian. But now I faced a new dilemma. What should I do with it? Should I go to the police? Should I press charges? Should I ruin their lives? Or should I forgive them? Should I let them go? Should I try to salvage what was left of our family? It was a difficult decision, a moral dilemma. What would you do? I thought about everything that had happened. The betrayal, the lies, the deceit. I thought about the pain they had caused me. And then I thought about my grandmother. I thought about her love, her wisdom, her generosity. I knew what she would want me to do. She wouldn't want me to seek revenge. She would want me to forgive. But could I? Could I forgive them for what they had done? It wouldn't be easy. It would take time. But I knew that it was the right thing to do. I decided to confront Paul and Lillian one last time. I gathered them in the living room of the Lakehouse. I told them that I knew everything. I showed them the second deed. They were stunned. They were speechless. They knew that they had been caught. I told them that I wasn't going to press charges. I told them that I wasn't going to ruin their lives. But I also told them that I could never trust them again. I asked them to leave. I told them that I never wanted to see them again. They left without a word. I was alone, but I was free. I kept the lake house. I renovated it. I filled it with love and laughter. I learned a valuable lesson. I learned that you can't always trust the people you love. But I also learned that forgiveness is possible. It took a long time, but eventually, I healed. I moved on with my life. I found happiness again. Years later, I received a letter from Lillian. She apologized for everything. She said that she was ashamed of what she had done. She said that she asked for my forgiveness. I thought about it for a long time. And then I wrote her back. I told her that I forgave her. It wasn't easy, but it was the right thing to do. The lake house remained in our family for many years. It became a place of healing and renewal, a place where we could all come together and remember the importance of love, forgiveness, and family. So what would you have done? Would you have sought revenge, or would you have chosen forgiveness? It's a tough question, I know, and there's no easy answer. But I hope that my story has given you something to think about. A reminder that even in the face of the deepest betrayal, hope and healing are always possible. That power isn't about retribution, but about choosing your own path. I chose to protect myself, my family's legacy, and ultimately, my own peace of mind. And that's my truth. If you like this story, give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more tales of everyday people facing extraordinary dilemmas. Let me know in the comments what choice you would have made. It's funny, isn't it? How a single moment can redefine everything you thought you knew. I often think back to that 4th of July, to the smell of sunscreen and the sound of laughter, all masking a deception that would change my life forever. I continued working at the elementary school, pouring my heart into those little faces, trying to make a difference in their lives, even as my own felt shattered into a million pieces. Each child's innocent trust felt like a sharp reminder of what I'd lost. The following weeks were a blur. I spent hours poring over legal documents, consulting with lawyers, trying to understand the full extent of Paul and Lillian's scheme. The more I learned, the more appalled I became. They had been planning this for months, carefully manipulating events, weaving a web of lies that had nearly ensnared me completely. The financial records were a tangled mess, but I slowly began to unravel them. I discovered that Paul had taken out a second mortgage on our house without my knowledge. He had used the money to pay off his gambling debts and to fund Lillian's extravagant lifestyle. It was all so calculated, so cold. And the worst part was, they seemed to feel no remorse. They had justified their actions, convinced themselves that they were entitled to the lake house, that they deserved the money. I remember one evening, sitting alone in the living room, staring at the photographs on the mantelpiece. Pictures of Paul and me, smiling, happy, seemingly in love. Pictures of Lillian and me, laughing, sharing secrets, like sisters. It all felt so fake now, so hollow. How could I have been so wrong about them? How could I have let them deceive me so easily? Could you ever look at those same pictures again? I decided to visit my mother. I needed to talk to someone who knew Paul and Lillian, someone who could offer me some perspective. My mother was shocked by the news. She had always liked Paul, had considered him a good husband, and she had always been close to Lillian, her sister. She couldn't believe that they would do something so terrible. "I don't understand," she said, shaking her head. What could they possibly be thinking? I explained everything to her, showing her the documents, recounting the events of that fateful 4th of July. She listened patiently, her face etched with disbelief and sorrow. When I finished, she reached out and took my hand. "I'm so sorry," she said. "I had no idea." But sometimes people do things that are inexplicable. They get caught up in their own desires, their own insecurities. It doesn't make it right, but it does make it human. She paused, then added, "You have to forgive them, not for their sake, but for your own. Holding on to anger and resentment will only poison you." Her words resonated with me. I knew that she was right, but forgiveness felt like an impossible task. How could I forgive people who had hurt me so deeply? How could I forget what they had done? I drove back to the lake house, feeling even more confused than before. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the water. The air was still and quiet. I sat on the dock, watching the waves lap against the shore. As I sat there, I remembered something my grandmother used to say: "The lake has a way of cleansing the soul." I closed my eyes and took a deep breath, letting the cool air fill my lungs. I tried to imagine all the anger and resentment flowing out of me, into the lake, carried away by the current. It didn't work, not completely, but it helped a little. Later that night, I received a phone call. It was from a detective. He had been investigating Paul and Lillian, based on a tip he had received. He had uncovered even more evidence of their fraudulent activities, including a scheme to defraud several elderly people out of their life savings. They had been using the money to fund their lavish lifestyle, buying expensive cars, taking luxurious vacations, and gambling heavily. The detective asked me if I was willing to cooperate with the investigation. He said that my testimony would be crucial to building a strong case against them. I hesitated. I didn't want to be involved in a criminal trial. I didn't want to relive the pain and humiliation of the past few months. But I also knew that I had a responsibility to protect others from becoming victims of Paul and Lillian's greed. "I'll do it," I said. "I'll cooperate." The trial was a long and grueling process. Paul and Lillian pleaded not guilty, of course. They tried to paint themselves as victims, claiming that they had been manipulated by others, but the evidence against them was overwhelming. The detective presented a mountain of documents, financial records, and witness testimony. I took the stand and told my story, recounting the events of that fateful 4th of July, describing the betrayal and the lies. It was incredibly difficult, but I knew that I had to do it. I had to speak the truth. In the end, the jury found them guilty.